Welcome to another week of the Three Guys Analyze podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Matt, calling in from the great Grove of Columbus, Tony Crier, and calling us from the north of the Burg of Perry, Rick Martin. Welcome, guys, and how are we today? Tony, what's your weekend been like?
Well, after that Minnesota game, very disappointing, and then to have to watch the Bears
Row
on
the
Sunday
boat.
night just makes it even worse.
Well, now that you bring it up, let's start with that game. Minnesota losing to Iowa,
Row the
23-19. Yes, row the boat indeed, Mr. Martin. Tony, what do you got to say for yourself after this debacle of epic proportions?
I mean, we all knew this game screamed trap. You know, it was at Kinnick, and Minnesota was coming off that very dramatic victory against Penn State, and they were on cloud nine. I think I made the comparison that this reminded me of that 06 Rutgers team that beat Louisville in prime time, and then came out laid an egg and lost their next game out. And this screamed at exactly how it happened. I mean, they came out flat. They couldn't run the ball. They became too one-dimensional too quickly, and they might have lost Tanner Morgan, their quarterback, from a concussion on the last drive for this week at Northwestern, and they're even talking about maybe even the next week with their big matchup against Wisconsin. But I'll tell you what, that Minnesota defense definitely worried me because they Iowa offense looked more dynamic than all year. But as far as playing in the Rose Bowl, I think they definitely aren't dead yet with that. But their margin for error is 0 with who they have left in Northwestern and Wisconsin. But I don't necessarily think that when they play in the Big Ten title game, I don't think they need to keep it close because at that point they'll be better than both a 2-loss Penn State team that they actually beat, as well as at that point a 3-loss Michigan and a 3-loss Wisconsin. I think what impressed me the most was the defensive end from Iowa, AJ Epenza. I might have butchered that name, but he had 2.5 sacks, and he seemed like he had that Khalil Mack-esque advantage in the game for sure.
Wow, a lot of things there. Number one, before we go to Ricky, you assume they're going to beat Wisconsin without a doubt. Based on this performance, I find that suspect. And you compare it in Iowa defensive end to Khalil Mack. So that's two things there. Ricky, I know you've been a huge supporter of Gopher Nation. What do you got to say about this one?
So I did some research, particular topic here. Here's Clemson's last 5 games since that comparison was made. They beat Louisville 45-10, BC 59-7, Wofford 59-14, NC State 55-10, and Wake Forest 55-2 or 52-3. Sorry. And Minnesota, I don't understand how you can call that a trap game against a team that's better than you, but sure, we'll call it a trap game. I think this just screams what I've been saying all along, that the Big Ten is not that. Minnesota is not a good college. They're a decent college football team. They're not a good or great college football team. I expect that they could easily lose to Wisconsin. I actually think they'll be underdogs in that game. And even talk about a letdown game. I mean, how do you get up to play Northwestern now? Your season basically of trying to make the college football playoff just ended. And you were the only game on in primetime, so everyone watched your failures. So all I got to say is they better be rowing the boat pretty quick, because I think their boat just sprung a leak this week. And Tony, I don't know. What do you got to say about your boys there? I think they're done.
I disagree. Wisconsin we've seen be so one-dimensional with just the run game that as long as Minnesota comes in and plays defense and gets stops, I think there's definitely opportunity. I mean, they can win the turnover battle, and they can win, the little things that you have to win. And PJ Fleck over the years has been good at making sure his team does, in fact, win in doing those little things.
Do you think you single-handedly motivated Clemson? Just asking.
I disagree on that, I guess. I mean, I think Dabo definitely I think he got his motivation from being fifth in that first college football ranking.
Oh, okay. I thought it might have something to do with what you said, but that's fine.
Yeah,
No.
I'm gonna. This was a real. I mean, I think we all knew Minnesota wasn't that great. They have a really easy schedule. Iowa never been a real powerhouse of a football team. There was that year where back in 2002, right, where Ohio State won the title, and Iowa was pretty good with Brad Banks. I mean, was that the last time? So, Tony, I think you should settle down with your hot Minnesota takes here. I think they get beat pretty handedly by Wisconsin. I think we can agree they're a better team than Iowa. Yeah. So I love your enthusiasm for PJ Fleck. You know, secure the bag, man. That's all I got to say about that. But we'll see going forward. If I'm Ohio State, I know what I said last week about, you never know what they're gonna do. But without Tanner Morgan, I don't think we have much to fear on the Minnesota front. All right, moving on. Another big game this past week was the Battle of the Big 12. We had Baylor, who's undefeated, rolling into a one-loss Oklahoma team. Baylor up early in this game. Looked like they had secured the win, moving the ball all over Oklahoma. And then Jalen Hurts leads the ferocious comeback and securing a 34-31 victory. Ricky, what do you think this says about Oklahoma's chances in the college playoff?
It non-existent. I don't think it helped them at all, just because I thought that entering the game or entering the week, they did not have a chance to make it. It's too logjam at the top, to be honest, with the one-loss schools. And I think that the committee, over the course of the rankings for the last 3 weeks, have just shown that Oklahoma is on the outside looking in. They moved up one spot, but that was more of a product of Minnesota losing than it was Oklahoma winning. I don't think this team is – I think since Lincoln Riley's taken over, this is the worst team that they've had. Jalen Hurts is the worst quarterback that they've had. I think his Heisman candidacy is all non-existent. I just don't think that there's any avenue that he can have to – he might not even make it to New York, depending on how many people they decide to bring. I'm just saying it's true. Wow. There's Oklahoma quarterback fatigue. There's an Oklahoma getting into the playoff fatigue, and it shows with them being ranked. I mean, they're ninth in the ranking right now. What would have to happen over the next 3 weeks or 3 games for them to move into a top 4 spot? I just don't see it. Their last 2 games are against a mediocre TCU team, and then add a decent but not great Oklahoma State team. So, and then they're going to be meeting Baylor again in the Big 12 championship game. So I don't really – what's that?
It is a ranked Oklahoma State team, mind you.
Yeah, I said they were mediocre. I mean, they're 21st?
True, but they're still ranked.
Okay, they're ranked, but listen, it's a product of they don't have an impressive win on their resume. Texas, whichever one wanted to give kudos to, has fallen completely off the map. The Big 12 is definitely in a down year. You've got 2 SEC schools that are going to be in the top. I don't see them leapfrogging Alabama and the 2 SEC schools. I was talking about Georgia and LSU, so I'm not even getting to Bama. I think the winner, a one-loss Pac-12 winner, is going to make it in over a one-loss Big 12 winner. And you've still got to contend with what happens in the Big Ten, because I see 2 Big Ten schools getting in depending on how this plays out before a one Oklahoma school gets in. So, I don't see the path. If someone wants to explain it to me, I'm all ears, but I don't see the path for them making the playoffs. I think you can cross them off.
All right, Tony. So
the biggest thing that needs to happen for Oklahoma is they just need some chaos. And I don't think the way this college football season is, I mean, yeah, there's been some, but I don't think there's going to be enough to get them to slide 5 spots. I mean, granted, Penn State's going to drop this week after losing to Ohio State. Georgia should drop out and lose to LSU in the SEC title game. I mean, we know Clemson's probably not going to lose. Ohio State probably not going to lose. And then, Oregon and Utah play each other. And then there's the band.
Oregon and Utah will play each other in the Pac-12. There being a 2-loss Pac-12 champion is very slim. Oregon and Utah don't play in the regular season.
True, but, upsets have happened this year. And I'll be honest, I think Oregon's a better football team than Utah. I think if Utah wins the Pac-12 title, I could agree with Oklahoma leapfrogging Utah.
What have we seen from Oklahoma this year? They seem to turn the switch on, turn the switch off. They barely pull it out against a mediocre Texas team. They lose to Kansas State. They get down dreaded 28-3 to Baylor. And, it's what are you going to get? The Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, for me, it's just like they can't really do anything. And in chaos, what is that going to happen? Who knows? But I think on the outside looking in, and I'd agree with you, Tony, that Oregon or Utah, I think, have a better shot. Based on the rankings now, and we're going to get to those soon here, they're already ranked ahead of them. So if those teams went out, I mean, what's the justification of putting Oklahoma in it? Beating Baylor again? Is that really impressive?
But not unprecedented.
No, I guess not.
No, but they play in the worst conference. Of all the Power 5 conferences, the Big 12 is the worst of them all. And I think that the committee is showing you the fact that there are 3 SEC schools ranked above Oklahoma tells you the SEC schools before they put in a Big 12 school. That's just the fact of the matter.
Look, it's great that Lincoln Riley can get these guys in there and he can keep the offense flowing, but I think there's a little Big 12 fatigue, and I think people they have the reputation now that they don't play defense, and the team's a little bit overhyped. They can't come through in the clutch, maybe. So I think they're just out on the outside looking at it. Now,
you mean Lincoln Riley, the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns? Is that
yes,
the Lincoln Riley you're referring to?
The same Lincoln Riley. That's the one.
Starting that rumor now.
Yes.
Hot take central there.
Yes. He's going to be the next guy to replace the great Fred Kitchens. He's doing great work in Cleveland right now. He'll probably go
Freddie
on.
Kitchens has to get back to his job as a forklift driver at the local steel mill there in Cleveland.
Yeah, he's got over in Youngstown. He's probably got some work to put in. So the maybe the biggest thing that happened over the course of the weekend was the Tua Tagovailoa injury. Up 35-7 at the end of the first half on a 2-minute drill situation. Tua goes down, gets carted off. He's diagnosed with a dislocated hip, which happens to be the very same injury that curtailed Bo Jackson's professional career. Tony, what is your takeaway from this Tua injury?
I wondered when it happened, I wondered if he was still going to commit to the draft because either Adam Scheffler or Chris Mortensen said that he probably will not be ready for any 2020 workout or anything like that.
So, Rick, Tony makes some valid points about maybe Tua's draft stock being affected. What was your first takeaway when you read about the Tua Tagovailoa injury?
It's devastating. You don't want to see that happen to Tua. I think that I was put his career into some sort of perspective in my own mind, and kind of it's actually somewhat tragic if you think about it. And maybe tragic is too strong a word, but it certainly is. Most careers, look some sort of graph that's going in the positive or upward direction. And I think his started off so high with coming in as a freshman and filling in the second half of that national championship game against Georgia, throwing the game-winning touchdown pass in overtime. And really, it's just been a solid career, but he's never been able to reach those heights again. So I felt bad for him. I felt bad knowing that, would go out and still a national champion, but not a team that he had led from the start of the season to the end of the season. Certainly his draft stock is something to be concerned with. Personally, I would go to the NFL now if I was him. I mean, we can get to this in a later segment, but I think, we've seen the level of quarterback play. I mean, there's 3 Allens starting NFL football games that, like, I've only barely ever heard of Josh Allen, and I don't know who the other 2 even are. So to say that this is going to be some massive hit on his draft stock, I don't necessarily buy that. I think teams are so desperate to just find some quarterback, and there's so few quality quarterbacks in the league that he's still going to be a top 10, if not top 5 draft pick. So if I'm him, I spend some time, I get healthy, and I go see what the NFL has to offer.
Yeah, obviously I wasn't watching the game. I mean, was anyone really watching the game? I mean, they were playing Mississippi State.
At that point.
And it's an injury. We've seen him get injured before. I mean, the guy had surgery for a high ankle sprain. So you don't think it's serious. And I read he got carted off and he dislocated his hip. Now, the first thing I read was, they said it was the same injury that Bo Jackson had. And obviously that was in the 80s when that occurred, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, health medicine has increased just a little bit from that. So you never really know how, impactful these things are. I still think of Adrian Peterson coming back from a complete ACL tear in 6 months and looked like he just went through like a Marines level fitness program. So obviously he's going to come back and he's going to be healthy. Now, how long is that going to take? I think you're right, Ricky, that he's still going to get drafted. Maybe he falls a little bit. Maybe he gets drafted by a team that doesn't need him right away. Maybe a team that has someone that they can roll out there like a Ryan Fitzpatrick or, like Joe Flacco is probably going to get released from the Broncos, something like that where he can come in relief when he's healthy again. But I definitely, if I'm him, I'm trying to get to the NFL. I'm trying to get paid, get a check ASAP because, he comes back to the NFL. Is it going to help him? Like Herbert, he came back to Oregon, and has it really helped him? I don't think so. I think if he comes out last
Well, the
year,
other thing, too, is, I mean, he hasn't really been the model of health in Alabama.
he hasn't.
I mean, it seems like he's constantly on the injury report for one thing or another. So, I mean, he's had ankle issues his whole career. So I don't know that even playing another season in Alabama can he even stay healthy for that. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Go make your money when you can.
Yeah. We've seen all we need to see out of Tua. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to say, well, we need another year to see what he can do. I don't think that's an issue. I think before I even thought of any sort of NFL's draft stock, I just thought of the impact on Alabama as a team, like this year. Obviously, they, losing to LSU, that kind of puts them out a little bit. Now, we saw Ohio State lose J.T. Barrett this late in the year and come back with Cardale. And, the playoff committee kept them in. Tony, now I don't know if you think Alabama still has a chance here. Do you think the committee looks at this and sees how they play the next couple of weeks?
Well, I mean, obviously there's some precedent to all of this with Ohio State with J.T. Barrett, as well as, Alabama in 2017 not getting in. But I just this year, unless they just go into Auburn and just beat them like 100-0, and it's just utter destruction, I just don't see it. And as of right now, I think Auburn, they have them listed as even a 4 or 5 point favorite. So Alabama's not even favored right now, if that's saying something.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I think people probably see this Mac Jones guy and they probably don't think too much of him. I mean, he's thrown for 566 yards and 4 touchdowns and 1 pick and backup time. Now, I think Alabama has the infrastructure there to support a guy that doesn't have a lot of starts. Ricky, do you think this injury has any impact on Alabama's chances in the playoff?
I think it does, and I think that's part of what the committee is supposed to be there for, is, human observers versus computer programs just putting an algorithm into place that tells you who the best team is. So I think they're monitoring it. I think, the Ohio State comparison, while it's a good one, we all know Ohio State doesn't get into the playoff that year if they don't just demolish Wisconsin in that Big Ten title game and look great doing so. So I think Alabama has a very narrow path to get to the Final Four, to get to the playoff. I think it starts with LSU's got to win outright, so they've got to beat Georgia in the SEC title game. And then I think that they need a 2-loss Pac-12 champion. And if those two things happen, I think it'll be a third thing. They look good in their game against Auburn, and they look like this Jones is going to step in and be a good quarterback right away. I think if those three things happen, it's a real debate between them and possibly a 1-loss Oklahoma team, or even a 2-loss Georgia team, depending on how close that game is against LSU. But I think they've got a very, very rough road to try to make the playoff, and this certainly doesn't help.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think last week we kind of said, they're out regardless of what happens, especially now. And if they look rough again, obviously they would have to win with a lot of style points to have a chance. But I think maybe the committee sees this, and they saw them ranked at 5, and we'll get to that here momentarily. I think this gives the committee reasons to drop them, that maybe they had some pressure on them to keep them up there in the first place. So moving on, let's look at those rankings. The top 7 hasn't changed. Still LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, and Utah. Leaders in the Pac-12 at 6 and 7. Penn State's moved up 1 to 8, and the aforementioned Oklahoma's up to number 9. And the darling sweetheart, Minnesota, is at number 10. I think I talked to Tony about this earlier. The 7-4 USC Trojans have moved up to 23. So that's a surprising situation, I'm sure. Tony, quick takeaways from the most recent college football playoff ranking.
You mentioned the USC. What's also noticeable, the 4-loss USC, and at 21 is the 4-loss Iowa State team. And what's interesting is the 3-loss Texas A&M team and a 3-loss Pitt team is not ranked. And that to me, I find it interesting. And, there's always conspiracies about the committee and what they're thinking. And I think this is one of those ideas where, by putting in USC and Iowa State, it makes Oregon and Oklahoma therefore look better because they have wins over them. But at the same time, it makes Utah look even a little bit better because their loss was to a now ranked USC school. Also, another surprise, Memphis usurped Cincinnati for the Group of 5 bid right now. But there's definitely 4 or 5 teams still wide open in that for sure. But I definitely – right now, you just look at it and you see Ohio State, I think, is going to end up number 1, LSU 2, Clemson 3, and then either your Pac-12 champion 4 or your Big 12 title champion if chaos ensues. I think the only way Bama ends up making it again, everybody else having 2 losses.
Yeah, and as you can see, chaos is not yet ranked by the playoff committee. I think there are others receiving votes this week. Ricky, any takeaways from these rankings?
I don't know if it's a takeaway. I guess as the weeks go on, I mentioned Clemson's last 5 games. Really, since that North Carolina game, I think I saw some stat, their average margin of victory is over 45 points a game. So I do know, and I'm going to correct myself here because the ACC is by far the worst Power 5 conference. I apologize to the Big 12 for not seeing that. But I think Clemson might be better than people expect. And I'm going to be quite honest with you. If, as we like to do, right, as the playoffs started today, I would be very concerned with playing Clemson if I'm an Ohio State fan in that first playoff game, because I think that people have written Clemson off. I think no one's talked about Trevor Lawrence. I think after that close game against North Carolina and the fact they play in a conference that doesn't have a single team ranked in the college football, which is just that is crazy. I don't know if that's ever happened before this late in the season that a Power 5 conference only has one school that's ranked. But I think people have just written them off, and I think that's a dangerous thing. And so I think I'm going to watch out for Clemson. Other than that, I think we've touched on the other part. I mean, Bama definitely has the best loss of any of the schools in the top 10, or at least the one-loss schools that are in the top 10. But obviously, losing two is a big blow. Oregon, Utah should work itself out because I expect both of those teams to finish 11-1 and go play each other in the Pac-12 title game. And then, we've got a big matchup there in the Big Ten, Penn State, Ohio State this weekend. So we'll see how that turns out.
So, Ricky, you brought up Ohio State and the big matchup they have this week against Penn State. So, big game on Fox at a nice 12 p.m. time is the number 8 Penn State Nittany Lions visits the number 2 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, this is a big showdown in the Big Ten, the biggest game Ohio State's played this year, the biggest game Penn State has played so far this year. And really, this is a test that Ohio State needs to really, the last couple games, they haven't had much competition. Now, Ohio State is an 18-point favorite at home. Tony, what are you thinking coming into this game?
With Ohio State being that 18-point favorite, I definitely see them covering. The two biggest questions going into this game is how can Penn State stop Ohio State on offense, and how can Penn State then keep up on offense? Ohio State currently, I've seen comparisons actually of this team being compared to the 2001 Miami Hurricane team that was so dominant. And currently, they're number 1 in scoring offense at 51.5 points a game, and number 1 in scoring defense at 9.8 points a game. And this team is just so dominant. And right now, the biggest question is, who is Penn State? The last 2 weeks, they have not looked very good in the loss to Minnesota, as well as the escape against Indiana. Earlier in the year, they escaped against Pitt. They do have quality wins with another close one with Michigan, and as well as Iowa. And right now, their biggest threat on offense, besides Shane Clifford, KJ Hamler, right now his status is up in the air with a injury that he had game against Indiana. So, looking at all this, Ohio State rolling big in this one.
All right, so I think, Tony, we can say you have Ohio State marked down with the cover, winning big in their first real test of the year. I guess Wisconsin was a good test, and they look pretty good against Wisconsin. So they'll have another thing to prove here with Penn State. Ricky, what do you think of this game coming into it?
I agree with Tony that Ohio State's going to cover the 18 points. I actually I think that line could be a little higher. I think that Clifford is pretty careless with the football, as is Penn State as a team overall. I think Ohio State's going to take advantage of those turnovers. I really think this Ohio State team has a chance to be great and rival the 2001 Hurricanes is a pretty strong compliment, but at least they could be probably the best team in Columbus since that 2014-15 campaign. I really, as I've said all along, that the Big Ten, in my opinion, is good but not great. I think there's 3 teams in college football that have really separated themselves from the pack, and the obvious is LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson are those teams, and LSU's had the hardest road, and Ohio State and Clemson have kind of been able to be dominant, but not necessarily really tested by a great team yet. Unfortunately, I just don't think Penn State falls in that category. I think it works from a marketing and market size that they're ranked high. They have a good record, but honestly, anyone who's watched Penn State this year play football, I don't think by any means that this is a great football team. So I've got Ohio State winning big. I guess my bold prediction here is Ohio State's defense is going to outscore Penn State's offense. because, like I said earlier, I think there's going to be lots of opportunities as Penn State tries to press to keep up with Ohio State's offense for some interceptions and fumbles, and possibly a few of those getting taken back to the house. So I expect Ohio State to win big. Let's say 42-13 is my final.
Now, we know the game is next week. Ricky, is there any chance at all at a look-ahead situation here for the Buckeyes?
I don't think so, because this team has managed to stay focused all year. I mean, that's one of the great things about watching this Ohio State team, and it's actually been pretty refreshing from watching during, I love Urban Meyer as a head coach, but there were certainly times during the Urban regime that you would get Ohio State, quote unquote, catching them looking forward. I mean, every time that they would lose one of those games to a Purdue, for example, you kind of said, I'm surprised but not shocked by that. There were some signs throughout the year that this team wasn't necessarily mentally focused all the time. And, talent's never been a question with Ohio State. They've always had top 5, top 3 classes, blue chippers across the board, first-round draft picks. So it's never been a question about talent. It's always been a question about focus with them. And this year, I've been really impressed with Ryan and his coaching staff, that he's managed to keep these guys focused game in and game out. It doesn't matter if they're playing Rutgers, Wisconsin, or who. They really seem to do well. And so, no, I don't expect there to be any sort of look-ahead mentality.
Tony, what do you think? Any possibility for a look-ahead game, or is Ohio State going to be ready to roll on Saturday?
Oh, they'll be ready to roll. I think the refreshingness of Ryan Day has definitely been a positive for Ohio State. I think he's definitely building the culture at Ohio State currently in his way. I mean, to the point where he's taking from all his influences like Urban, as well as Chip Kelly, and several other influences that he has had along his and honestly, like this, if it wasn't for how great PJ Fleck has done in Minnesota, I would think this would be Ryan Day's best opportunity to win the Big Ten, because honestly, if you look back earlier in the season, most pundits had Ohio State, dropping off a little bit, maybe losing 2 or 3 games and maybe easing into at Ohio State. But just to come in and see just how dominant they are, it's a testament to everything that's currently being built in Columbus that truly rivals Alabama and Clemson at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they've been pretty dominant. And one of the things I'm really looking forward to watching is, I think every week Day adds some new wrinkle to the offense, some sort of weird motion or another weird formation, getting different guys in there. I love the depth that he's displayed. Obviously, Ohio State's had a lot of time to, get their 3rd, 4th, 5th stringers in there with the way, they've been blowing out people. You can see the depth. You can see the wide receiver talent. Master Teague, they always say every broadcast that he could start for any other team in the Big Ten, besides probably Wisconsin. What I'm really looking forward to is the evolution of Justin Fields. I think this is a big game for him. He's had some big games, and now, this is the only game to watch. And I think there are a lot of people, that know of Ohio State that maybe haven't watched any of their games and don't know much about Justin Fields other than that he left Georgia, and now he's doing well for Ohio State. I'm really looking to see him in this real national spotlight, really showing out, getting the ball downfield, making big plays through the air and on the ground. I think this could be a really big performance for him. The guy has 31 touchdowns and 1 pick so far. I mean, I think that's only going to get better. We know what JK can do on the ground, but I think this really is going to be, Justin Fields' time. Ricky, do you think what's your take on Justin Fields so far this year?
He's been as advertised, if not better. I mean, he's the certainly if J.K. Dobbins is maybe the heartbeat of the offense, Justin Fields is the brain, kind of keeping everything flowing and running. His decision making has been impeccable, as you mentioned. Only one interception on the year, and those are the kind of things that allow you to be a dominant offense and to win games by 30, 40 points consistently is not turning the ball over, which he's done a great job of. I think that he's currently second, in my opinion, in the Heisman voting. I think there's a pretty wide gap between him and Burrow, but this is a game that, like you said, is going to have all eyes on it. He's got two huge nationally televised games to close that gap, and I think he starts with this one against Penn State. I think he's going to go out there and he's going to have something to prove, and I expect him to throw for 4 or 5 touchdowns on the day, or at least be accountable for those, whether it be with his legs or his arm. So I'm a big Justin Fields fan. I think he's certainly capable of leading them to a national title, and he'll be in New York come time to see the Heisman Trophy.
So, Tony, I'll leave this up to you. We're one season in with Justin Fields. You like him? You already like him better than JT Barrett?
Absolutely. JT Barrett, he had some deficiencies, I guess, if you would, in the passing game. JT Barrett was basically just running back. And now to see Justin Fields come in and he's throwing the ball downfield and he's making plays with his arms, and he can do it with his feet too. It's just, I guess that's also refreshing to see as well. And then after, Dwayne Haskins come in and play as well as he did last year. We just keep chugging out these good quarterbacks. I think this one's a special one, I guess, for Ohio State, in my opinion, up there with a Terrell Pryor or Troy Smith in the modern Buckeye era.
Well,
and no love for Braxton Miller. Wow.
None.
Braxton, he's a competitor. He was in that 5-5 season. What were we? Was it 6 and some? I don't know. That Luke Fickell season. But I think Justin Fields is pretty good, and I think we all can say that.
I also say still 6-1 odds to win the Heisman right now. Still a great value pick right now with his remaining schedule.
Yeah. So hey, they were betting on little prop bets here. Take that action on Justin Fields, and you might find yourself a winner. But I think we're all pretty in the Joey Burrow camp. So that about wraps it up. I think we've said all we want to say about the Ohio State-Penn State game. There's nothing left now but to watch it on Saturday at noon on Fox. Well, guys, thank you for joining us today. Listeners, thank you for listening. Tony, anything on the go?
Lock of the week is your Buckeyes at -18 this week.
All right. Ricky, anything to say to the audience?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. And I'll leave you guys on a nice parting note. If you're with your family this weekend, give thanks, eat a lot of turkey, definitely the stuffing. I'm more of a pie man myself, so enjoy. Happy trails, folks, and have a good one.